Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Hot Takes for Grandmasters Season 2 of 2021. My name is TJ, and I'm joined by my constant co-host, the very talented Sottle. Sottle, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. So talented that I'll fell barrage you in the face for 8, TJ. That's just what I'm known best for. I'm feeling great. I think another successful week of Grandmasters, even though I was a little bit ill and missed the middle of it. Hopefully that little bit of lack of knowledge won't get exploited too hard by my partner TJ this time around. But feeling good, ready to get into another one.
So that's where I got you, Sottle. I didn't say what you were talented with, so we're just going to leave that a mystery. You could be a very talented loser, as we've come to expect on Hot Takes. But not this season, because Sottle and I are working together to get to the bottom of these hot takes. We're in this together, Sottle. So let's go ahead and get underway with our first hot take for this week. Hot take number 1. Garrote Rogue, the new Garrote Rogue, the Tempo Garrote Rogue, is the most difficult competitive deck to play in many years.
Nonsense. I do think the deck's very good. I think, first and foremost, we're just starting to see it now. I kind of called it out in Grandmasters, like, keep your eyes open for the next 72 hours or so, because you'll start seeing Garrote Rogue hit. I'm saying Garrote, you've infected me. Garrote Rogue hitting rank 1 legend with regularity, and that is kind of happening right now. I think I've seen at least Frenetic and Swids do it just on my timeline. I'm not sure if others have as well, but I think the difficulty of the deck is overstated. And this is kind of a hard point to explain, but I think the deck has a reputation of being difficult because it falls flat on its face when you're making mistakes to begin with. Like most decks, like say if you pick up Quest Shaman or Handlock or whatever, and you've seen a couple of other people play it a couple of times and you start playing it, you'll make a ton of mistakes, but you won't get punished super hard for it. You'll still win some games. So you'll think you're decent at the deck when you're not. You're actually terrible. It's just that you have a decent win rate to begin with playing that deck at a mediocre fashion. If you play Garrote Rogue in a mediocre fashion, you're going to lose horribly over and over and over again. So you have to get to that good level with the deck before you even start winning. And that's why I think the deck has a reputation of being hard, because it's very, very punishing. There's a lot of things that you need to learn as a baseline before you can even start winning. But I suppose it is also kind of a semantic argument on definition, because you could argue that that fits into the brief, right? But I think there are myriad other decks that are more difficult to achieve the skill cap with. Like even in the current meta right now, let alone for going back many years in competitive history. I think the difficulty of Garrote Rogue is a little bit overrated.
Wow, Sottle. Wow. So I will counter, because I disagree with you. I do think it's a very difficult deck. I do agree with your points, however, in that, you know, you can, in other decks, you can make mistakes and still win, so you feel like you're better. Yeah. And in Garrote Rogue, when you make mistakes, you lose the game. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that has anything to do with difficulty, right? There's skill ceilings and whatnot, but like the average difficulty of every game, I think, is just tough. There are I win hands with every deck, right? There's these blowout hands with every deck. And Garrote Rogue has them where you have Octobot and Field Contact in your mulligan and you kill them on 6 or 7 or whatever. It's very straightforward. You draw your deck. But I do feel like Garrote Rogue, especially in the current competitive metagame, where you're not given a lot of times in certain matchups, if players expect it and bring decks that, you know, can beat it from time to time, you're not going to have those pop-off turns as often, and it changes from game to game. The games where you're not given Field Contact or Octobot and you have to come up with creative strategies. The games where you have to recognize when it's not even optimal to go for Garrotes and it's optimal to play for Tempo. And then the ones where you know you only have one more turn and have to find these crazy ways to optimize winning the game when it's not 100%. Right? I think that it does take some time to get to that, to hit that learning curve where you can recognize the 100% lethals. But it takes a very, very long time, and I don't think anybody's mastered the games where it's not 100% lethal, but you have to give yourself the best odds. And those turns, from what I've seen, watching streams, watching competitive play, I don't think anybody's there yet. maybe the players that have been playing the deck for longer than most at this point, which is like a week and a half, but I do think that the games that aren't straightforward, where you draw your deck and you have 100% lethal, those are very, very difficult to win, and that's where this hot take is coming from.
And I agree with all those things. I think all of those things that you've described do exist with the deck, but everything that you've described can actually, I think, can be applied in generic terms to learning how to play Hearthstone. When you say, sometimes you just don't hit the good draw and you have to work out, switch up your strategy, maybe play for tempo even though you're a combo deck or more of a value-based deck, work out how to buy time so you can draw through your deck further, find a win condition, find creative win conditions, go for a lethal out even if it's unlikely because you only have one turn left. Don't all of those things exist with every deck in Hearthstone? Because that's kind of the point I'm making, is that all of those things exist with other decks, and I think other decks do a lot of that adapting to matchup styles on the fly more, because I think generally Garrote Rogue does have a linear win condition in a large percentage of games, even if sometimes you can adapt. Whereas with those other decks, you do have to be a lot more adaptable, and I think a large amount of the difficulty that's been accounted for Garrote Rogue is in mechanics and in rote memorization of patterns, which I don't think is a particularly difficult skill, and isn't something that I particularly factor into actually being good at the strategic level of Hearthstone.
Again, all of those things are true. I just think Garrote Rogue is harder than the other ones to learn.
Then I think we have reached an impasse, TJ, and it was a thrilling discussion. It was the meeting of two great minds, but we're probably going to have to leave it there.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Let's quickly, in the next 30 seconds, give some special shout-outs to difficult decks of the past. Patron Warrior.
Patron Warriors, for sure, yeah. Freeze Mage. I mean, if we want to go current, D6 Warlock, even though it got deleted, I think that very clearly has all the same things that you were describing before.
Yep, Brute DH. Huge special shout-out to Brute DH.
All right, moving on. Next topic. You've killed it.
That deck's actually really easy. You find your brutes or you don't. Bada bing, bada boom. All right, second hot take. We're only doing 2 hot takes now because Sato and I tend to talk a lot when we're passionate about a subject.
Yeah.
And this one I like. So, Conquest makes too many Grandmasters lazy with their lineup construction.
Yeah, so this was my submission, and kind of the angle that this is coming from is that I looked at lineups coming into this week and was disappointed to just see the amount of Quest Shaman, Handlock, XX lineups coming through, Shadow Priest thrown in there, whatever else. Because obviously the spirit of Conquest is to open up these target strategies, and I think especially now, when a lot of the real power spike decks of the format have been adjusted, everything's a little bit more normalized, and it feels like the expected brings should have been targetable, and I think that's played out in results, right? I think way too many people brought the Shaman Handlock dyad and were punished for it, because if you look at the results of who ended up doing well, in Europe it was a straight up clash between 2 target lineups. In Americas, a target lineup won the whole thing, defeating a good decks lineup in the final, and then the same thing in APAC as well, a target lineup defeated a good decks lineup. So it felt like to me that just this week too many people just weren't really engaging with the spirit of Conquest, or maybe just couldn't find a lineup that they liked and defaulted back to good decks, and it felt like a few people got punished for that.
And I'm going to agree with your overall sentiment here, which is not the spirit of hot takes, but now it kind of is the spirit of hot takes.
Friendship and collaboration.
That's right. That's what we're all here for. And I think even if you go deeper than that to top 4s, top 8s of this weekend, you see a lot of the target strategies which were less represented have success relative to the success of the good decks lineup. Like there were 2 target strategies, McBannerface and Dreadeye, in the top 4 for Americas, and they just happened to face each other, right? If it was the other side of the bracket where you had the target strategies versus good decks, it would have been exactly like Europe, where it was 2 target strategies. And it could be a product of the metagame, right? To play devil's advocate here. Players have gotten used to in the past the good decks lineup just performing well, because when there's not really too many target strategies available to you, where a deck's just, or 2 decks are just so good that even banning one, you're left with one that doesn't have that many bad matchups, sure. But I do think that players time and time again in Conquest have been rewarded for these creative target strategies that the players in Grandmasters do need to just think deeper and not just say, oh, well, another week of Conquest, just bring the good stuff, but instead be rewarded like we saw this weekend from actually, trying to make a cohesive lineup and not just heading over to just replay and slapping together the full good stuff.
And I think a lot of that has to be a product of reacting to where we are with the design philosophy of the game, right? Because right now it does feel like, again, this is just from an outsider perspective, the philosophy is to allow powerful things to exist and then keep an eye on them and adjust them as time goes on, right? I think we've seen that throughout the last few expansions, that they're willing to take these big risks and then nerf them down the line. So I think that plays into Conquest, where you have to understand where we are in that cycle, right? Like where we had the extreme outliers before with 8-mana Flesh Giant and D6 Warlock and all of these things. No, you weren't going to consistently target any of those decks. You probably had to ban them out, and then targeting anything else kind of became too inconsistent because who knows what everyone else was bringing. But now everything's kind of normalized towards the center because we've hit that cycle where all of those things have been nerfed down. So now we're in the position where a lot of the expected decks, even though they're the best decks by a little bit, it's only by a little bit, and they still have tons of bad matchups, and the likes of Quest Shaman and Handlock. And I think, you do need to pay attention to that sort of thing and how it affects Conquest lineup building, because I think for this particular metagame that we are in right now, post nerf wave number 3 or whatever we're on for this expansion, does very much reward a high-risk target-style strategy in Conquest, and the results of the week do seem to pan that out, because yes, some good decks lineups got to the finals, but as TJ was saying, there was an overwhelming amount of them. If none of them got to finals, that would be a statistical anomaly, and it would make our point even more. Whereas to the contrary, one out of 12 good decks lineups getting to a final just doesn't really mean anything statistically.
One thing that this does do, though, is get me excited for 2 weeks from now when we revisit Conquest.
Yeah, true.
If there's no balance changes between now and then, which, who knows at this point, but because I think that we're going to see a big difference in if the metagame is the same, like, the actual patch that we're playing on is the same, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of different stuff, so that's cool. And, we have Last Year's Standing coming up this weekend, which should be very spicy, because we've seen how bad some matchups are for some of those top decks. Like talk about Handlock versus Quest Mage, for instance, or Handlock versus Weapon Rogue.
Shadow Priest versus Weapon Rogue, as we saw in
Shadow
Americas.
Priest versus Weapon Rogue. Turn 3 lethal. It's just insane. So turn 2 for the Shadow Priest. Sorry, I should have. Equip your weapon and put a poison on it. Sure, you're dead.
Yeah, that needed clarifying. Thanks. Good job.
Yeah. So that should be something to look forward to. Multiple things to look forward to, actually. You know what? This metagame is just so great. The whole season I'm looking forward to and beyond. So that's it, though, for this week of
honestly,
Hot Takes.
Before you end, I feel like, honestly, I've hit upon the new format. If we're going to call the show Hot Takes, we should just come on camera and just say, we both like the game right now. And then that's it. The show ends. That's the hottest take of all.
that is a hot take. Yeah. I don't know. But it's crazy that it is a hot take. Maybe that's for next week, right? The game is good. Hot take number 1. Actually, that's the whole hot take. Maybe we'll discuss that every week. Yeah. All right. But yeah, that we do have to end here. So that's going to do it for Hot Takes Week 3. Again, make sure you tune in this Friday. We're going to be moving to Last Year Standing for week number 4 of Hearthstone Grandmasters. It's our halfway point through the regular season. So lots on the line for these players. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for more Hot Takes.